So I always believed. I always believed that they were the true organization. I always believed that they had the truth, and my being away really didn't change that any. And, I'd always prided myself on the fact that I knew the Bible so well. And I could quote scripture, and I could get into good little debates with other people who knew the Bible pretty well. And, a little source of pride that even some of my, really religious friends don't know the Bible so well. And it was a big source of pride. So that was part of my identity as well. And, finding out that I don't know the Bible, that everything that I do know is wrong, or most of what I know is wrong, or, part of what I know is wrong, and, but I'm thinking everything I know is wrong, so I'm a little bit freaking out. And of course, Armageddon's right around the corner, so I have like 5 minutes to figure it out, and I was really freaking out. And I remember even the brother, the sister that I was meeting with and talking with, she brought an elder on the last visit. My faith was pretty shattered, and she brought an elder, I guess, in a last ditch effort to try and save this poor lost soul they were losing. And he had a word for a defender of the faith, one that had left but still spoke up for it. So if any of you know that word, he said, what we call you? We call you blah, blah, blah. And I can't remember what he called me. And so if any of you know what that term is, I would love to know, because I was bawling my eyes out, so I don't really remember what he said. But apparently there's some Jehovah's Witness word that they use to describe people that I was. I was, another part of that, believing 100% that they had the truth, was you couldn't tell me anything against the witnesses. I was one of those weirdos that, argue with the History Channel, because they didn't know what they were talking about. They obviously got it all wrong because it contradicted the doctrines I grew up with. If anybody really laid into the witnesses, it was like I'd just turn them off. They don't understand. Any negative reports on the news, I would tune out. I just wasn't going to listen. And so it was one of those that even though I was away for a long time, I wasn't open to that they were false. I wasn't open to anything other than they were the truth. And, when my husband and I started dating, it turns out that he did a lot of research himself on the witnesses. Before he'd figure out what he's getting into before he gets into it. And, so a lot of the revelations that I found out, and I would share with him, he already knew. And it was like, well, why didn't you ever tell me? And you wouldn't have listened. And he's right, I wouldn't have listened. And even a few years ago, I actually kind of pulled out my old literature and I started looking into it again. And I think he was a little nervous. But our relationship is not based on either of us telling the other person how to live or think. So, he did, looking back, I can see where he was trying to break the spell a little bit without actually pushing, because he encouraged me a lot I'm a big reader, and so it wasn't a big push, but he did encourage me to read 1984. And how he did it was we were just discussing books and movies, and he kept kind of talking about this one and how good it was, and you'd really like it and that kind of thing. So I ended up reading it. Read it, loved it. I loved the book. Did I make any kind of connection between the Jehovah's Witnesses in 1984? No, I was completely, ran right over my head, because my armor was up. There was no reason for me to question it, and so there was no reason for me to look at anything in any kind of light. It just didn't associate the two. And in a previous video, I also talked about how I had discovered a Margaret Singer video on cults. I was not looking up cults in relationship to the witnesses at all. I was a young teenager in 78 when the Jim Jones People's Temple thing hit the news. And I was very aware of what was going on in the news and, the pictures that were going on and the reports of how many had died. And I was really struck by that. I mean, it was, I was a tender-hearted kid, and it really kind of got me that, so many people had been killed. And so I've always been kind of, an interest in cults, not like, secular or where I really wanted to delve into it. But, every time there was a Jim Jones documentary on, I would usually watch it. And, when the movie came out, I watched it. And, I was always kind of interested in cults. And I was playing around on YouTube one day, and, the farting cats led to the laughing babies, and it led to one thing led to another. And I ended up stumbling across this video. And I only listened to it about halfway through because, like I said, she struck home on a number of points, and I was absolutely freaked out, and I turned it off, and I couldn't deal with it. I have gone back and listened to it since then, and yeah, she strikes home. She strikes home, and that's where I really started to look into the cults regarding the religion. But I went through the emotions of, I was angry. At first, I was absolutely devastated. My heart was absolutely breaking. And I was terrified because if they're not the right religion, who is? If I'm wrong about everything, if my understanding of the Bible is completely false, where do I go from there? Where do I even begin? I can't go. I have a friend who's a hardcore Catholic. I mean, she never pushes me or anything, but she's a hardcore Catholic, and I know she would just love to get me. And I just can't. I can't get my head around religion. And to be honest with you, now that I'm really kind of in the healing stage of this, I don't think I will ever trust anybody to tell me what the scriptures say again. There's a lot of videos out that I do appreciate that are, they talk about scripture and, they kind of point things out, but they're not really, this is the way it has to be kind of thing. But they do kind of just bring up stuff. And I like those because I get to go in and do some looking myself. But I'm really not into anybody telling me one way or the other what the scriptures say. There is a video poster, and he mentioned something about 2020. Read the scriptures with 2020 vision, where you read 20 verses before and 20 verses after. And that was probably my favorite piece of advice, and I've really kind of started doing that, and letting the Bible talk to me rather than me trying to figure out what it says, just letting it talk. And so I am starting to see things that I hadn't before, and so the door is opening to being receptive to new doctrine. But to be honest with you, I'm really kind of freaking out a little bit about that. The best advice that I got was from Free Minds when I ordered my Crisis of Conscience from him, and sent him a little note about how I was freaking out a little bit, that everything I knew about the Bible was wrong, and I have like 5 minutes to figure it out, and I was just really freaking out a little bit. And he wrote back that just told me, ask God to give you a time out to recover from post-traumatic stress. And that was like the best advice anybody had said, and it was true. I just needed to stop putting the pressure on myself and just allow myself to go through what I was going through, and not try to add any extra pressure. And because I really was in freak out mode. I was crying a lot. I wasn't sleeping. I was I know my husband was really worried about me because I was really very emotional, and I am really not an emotional type. It takes a lot to really get me to cry, much less to be as overwhelmed as I was. And I was really, really periods of sobbing, or, he would say something completely innocent and I would just start bawling. And, I was really struggling with who am I now? What do I know?